I'm Raquel Vega. I am here with my colleague Gabriela Sacchetti. We both have led the work on WP4 on the pilots to implement and monitor open science. And I'll give a very brief description of the high-level processes governing the work that we've been doing these past years on WP4. However, I'll give you first the main goal of WP4. This was to design and implement action plans to pilot parts of the RAF, the Research Assessment Framework, but also of the OSCAM, through its accompanying interventions, as Emma just presented, in 5 organizations. However, we also carried out mutual learning sessions in order to draw results from the lessons learned. So these, I will not go through them again because they have already been introduced, but I'll just say that these are the main and the key protagonists of WP4. These are the pilots, and they have done all the work within this work package. They have worked very hard, and we have 3 universities and 2 funding organizations. So we have worked along 3 main lines. One was first to design the action plans. Then we had to implement the action plans and coordinate that implementation over a period of 18 months. And finally, we have some lessons learned from mutual learning sessions that we have been carrying out throughout these 18 months. So to start with, in this action plan design and implementation, first off, the pilots had to, define very early on at the onset what were going to be their cohorts and their unit or funding programs. Then, together with the WP leaders of 2 and 3, we did a selection of the indicators and the interventions that were the best fit from a strategic perspective, but also from a feasibility perspective for the pilots. And it's important to mention that we carried out also in WP2 and 3 a baseline audit to see what was the departure point for the pilots. Later on, so as you can see, the full implementation period was 18 months. So we started off with the first version of the action plans, which we started to implement in January 2024. The pilots ran until, just last month, June 2025. And during the first 9 months, we learned, we saw what was working, what was not working, and we collected those learnings into the revised version of the action plans that was ready by September 2024. So in the midterm, right after the first stage of implementation, which is how we call the first 9 months. Now, I'd like to also mention that apart from the individual interventions that each of the pilots chose, we also had some extra, let's say, common interventions to all pilots on the links between open science and trust, open science and industry, and open science and gender equality. Also on the mutual learning, and briefly on this, so the key process was that we were having bi-monthly mutual learning sessions. These sessions happened both online but also in person, and they were key to collecting challenges and recommendations from each of the pilot organizations on their implementation. So we worked from January 2024 until more or less September 2025 on collecting all these learnings, and we created by the end of November 2025 the first version of the mutual learning collection of recommendations and challenges. So later on in the next 9 months, or in the second stage of implementation, we complemented those learnings with the learnings from the last 9 months, and we are currently working on the, let's say, final mutual learning collection of lessons learned. And I may also briefly mention that, of course, there was a monitoring progress. We call it co-monitoring because we did it together with the pilots. So pilots were submitting reports during the first part of the implementation period, so the first 9 months, monthly, and during the second part of the implementation period, bi-monthly. And these reports were duly revised by a project partner, JISC in this case, led by Helen, our colleague Helen. And these were also instrumental for the mutual learning sessions because they also informed a little bit the guiding questions for the different sessions that we held.